Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to start the third annual Heroin Forum here tonight. We got some housekeeping announcements before we start. If anyone needs CEUs, please sign up at the registration table in the front hallway when you walk in here. Also, there's evaluations, and the program agendas and pens are also at the registration table. And just make sure to turn in the evaluations at the end of the program. Also, the in plain sight trailer is in the parking lot just right outside the entrance here. That's going to be open from 8 to 9 at the conclusion of the program. So we also encourage people to visit the service providers tables to pick up information about where to get help, resources on substance abuse, drug testing kits, and a Man in Recovery Foundation for Dope to Hope. Also, at the Grundy County State's Attorney's Office, we have drug testing kits that are available to the public if they come to my office and ask for them. No questions asked. Also, I'd like to thank Morris High School for allowing us to have this venue tonight to put on this very important forum. And I'd also thank GABC for helping videotaping this presentation so we can put the presentation on YouTube for those individuals that were unable to make it here tonight. But why are we here tonight? Why is this the third Heroin Forum that the State's Attorney's Office has presented? And the first time I attended a Heroin Forum was in the beginning of 2013, and they had a Heroin Forum up in Cook County, and it's basically because Cook County and all the suburban collar counties were seeing heroin abuse on the increase in the last 5 years. And DuPage County, just a few years ago, had over 80 heroin overdose fatalities. And through the administration of a Narcan program, they were able to reduce those fatalities in half. But the main thing was when we first had the Heroin Forum in Coal City, at then 2013, we're seeing a lot of heroin arrests in the area. But Paula Goodwin just gave me this information to share with the public tonight. And we had 3 heroin overdose fatalities in Grundy County just in the month of August. We've had 14 heroin arrests by the Grundy County Sheriff's Department this year. We've had 13 heroin arrests by the Morris Police Department this year, so that's 27 just between those police departments. We've had 119 treatments provided by the Department of Human Services, and those numbers were obtained from the DHS that reflect treatment sessions for heroin, and may also include the same subject more than once, but that was from January to June of 2015 for Grundy County, 119 treatments. Some of the things that we've also looked at is the use of Narcan in combating heroin overdoses. And for those that you don't know, Narcan is a substance that when you give it to an individual who's suffering from an opiate overdose, that it reverses the effect of the opiate overdose, so it actually saves lives. But in 2015, we've had 3 Narcan administrations in Braceville, 20 in Coal City. In Dwight, in 2014, we had 8. Then we had 22 in 2015 in Dwight. In Morris, from January 2014 until present day, 71 times they've administered Narcan. In the last approximately 18 months, Manuka is 4. So when we had the forum here tonight in Morris, this is a hotbed of activity for heroin-related activity. So that's the housekeeping notes. But since I've been the state's attorney, and since I became a prosecutor in 2004, we're seeing a major increase in heroin for a couple of reasons. A couple of reasons is that marijuana is a well-known gateway drug. The marijuana is more potent than ever. In the 60s, you'd see marijuana between 3 and 5% purity. Now Tim could talk about this in his presentation. Now we see heroin more than 80% pure. It's called dabbing. So the marijuana is more pure than ever, stronger than ever. It's easy to get hooked, and it's a gateway drug that we're seeing people use hardcore drugs like heroin. But nobody ever said that I'm going to wake up today, I'm going to be a heroin addict. Nobody's ever said that, but we've also seen, in just the 12 years that I've been a prosecutor, we've seen the prescription drug abuse on the rise. And a lot of the times we see a lot of doctors that are liberally writing prescriptions for the Oxycontin, the Vicodin, and the pain pills, and a lot of the times the parents are leaving the prescription drugs in the medicine cabinet and the kids are getting into the drugs because they know the drug has an intoxicating effect when it says, do not operate heavy machinery if you take this drug. Do not mix this with alcohol. Alcohol increases the potency of this drug, so individuals will leave prescribed drugs in their medicine cabinet. The kids are getting into it. And what we're seeing with the gateway drugs between the marijuana and the prescription pain pills is that the prescription pain pills, the Oxycontin, the Vicodin, they're all opiate-based drug, and heroin is a opiate-based drug. So we're seeing the pills go for, at the low end, $15 on the street. The heroin's $5 on the street, so people are getting their hands on the heroin. It's so cheap and readily available in our community. So I want to wrap this up. And at the very end, we have two great presentations. And at the end of their presentations, I'm going to ask them some questions so we get a lot of things out of this presentation. But when I was putting the Heroin Forum together, this wasn't something that, after we had 3 fatal overdoses in 45 days, this wasn't something that I put together. This is something I've been working on since February to get all the ducks in a row tonight. But one day I was sitting down at my desk, and every morning when I come into work, I read the newspaper because I got to see what's going on and see what's going on in other counties, because if there's problems in other counties, we're probably going to have the problem here. And I was reading the newspaper, and I turned to the obituary section, and I read one of the most powerful obituaries I've ever read. And I'm just going to read the opening paragraph here, then I'm going to turn it over to the Ridgely family. But I read this, and as soon as I read the obituary, I knew this was an individual, a family that I needed to reach out to bring here tonight because they have a very important story to tell. And it reads as follows. Brittany Nicole Ridgely, 24, of Custer Park, passed away unexpectedly on Friday, April 24, 2015, because of consequences and the result of a recent battle and addiction to heroin. Then I went on to read the rest of the obituary. But I took a look at that picture. I did some research online. I Googled her name. I pulled up some pictures, and I thought, that could be anybody's daughter. If this could happen to the Ridgely family, this could really happen to anybody. It was a very powerful obituary, and they have a very powerful story to tell tonight. But I first seen their PowerPoint presentation on Friday night, and I went into work about 6:30 at night. We had a half a day at work that day. I took my daughter to the pumpkin farm, and I went to work about 6:30, and I pulled up the PowerPoint presentation, and it just absolutely floored me. I mean, by looking at Brittany's background, what a great family upbringing she had. She's a normal child, and she died of a heroin overdose, so they have a very important message to bring here to us tonight. Please join me in welcoming Angela and Rodney Ridgely.
Hello, I'm Rodney, this is Angela. Thank you for hearing us today. We're trying to share our story about our daughter. Hopefully it can help someone, some family, or their daughter or son. Brittany Nicole was just an ordinary little girl. The state's attorney said she lived a normal life. She was born in December 14th, 1990. She was a daddy's girl from the very beginning. She loved the outdoors. She loved animals. One of her favorites was wood ducks. She used to wait for me by the door as I got home from work, and we would fill her grain bucket with grain and corn for the wood ducks, and we would go on the Kankakee River, so we'd go out in swampland next to our property, adjacent to a couple hundred acres of flooded timber. That was one of the highlights of her childhood, was feeding those ducks and going back, waiting for the birds to come and eat her corn. That was a very special time for tractors. And her grandfather and I both had tractors, old farmhauls, and she actually learned how to drive the tractor at a very young age, and it was a very special thing for her. It's a normal little girl. She was a cheerleader at Reed Custer School, and a volleyball player. Not much more to say than chorus. Christmas programs, was very involved, and she was a born leader, and she was a very special girl. She loved to be in charge. She was bold. She wasn't timid or shy. She stood up for what was right. Others that were being picked on or bullied. She wouldn't stand by and let things like that happen. Brittany was a born leader. She was a big sister, and she mothered her siblings. She was always teaching and helping them. She loved being the boss. Sometimes it wasn't always fun for the brothers and sister, but she was a great role model for them. Brittany had a good work ethic also. She always had strong character about work. She left school and we put her through CNA classes, and she went through with a phlebotomy training, and she got her a job at a doctor from Africa started a small business, private practice in Kankakee, where she moved up to be his office manager. And she loved her job, and she always had a very strong work ethic. I'm going to let Angela talk here from this point.
Hi, I'm Angela Ridgely. I came into the picture in 1997. Rodney was a single father raising 2 children on his own, a 6-year-old Brittany and a 4-year-old named RJ. I had a 6-month-old son, and we became mended together. We were both from broken relationships, and we just united together. We mended right together, and we were made whole instantly. I became the main caregiver in the family. I stayed home. I was a stay-at-home mom. I was there every single day, every single morning, getting them ready for school. Every single evening they came home, I was there. And Rodney worked hard to provide a living for us. We were always together, constantly. Every single Christmas play, every single cheerleading, every volleyball game, every chorus concert, every Christmas program, we went everywhere together. There was nothing that kept us apart. We were a strong, bonded, united family that was constantly together. Every year we would go down to Grandpa's farm. That was our yearly trip. We would try to go around Easter. We'd travel down to Grandpa's farm to go see him on Easter. We would, every birthday party, just together. We started a tradition several years ago, about 24 years ago. We started a tradition of going to an apple orchard together. And we did that every single year. We only missed 2 years out of 24. There's a picture up there. I think we passed it, but it was the grand opening of Gander Mountain, where we have all the deer antlers on. And it was grand opening the Gander Mountain, and we went in and they had the antlers, and we thought it would be fun to put those on. So we definitely all walked around the store looking like that. Once Brittany was a teenager, she met a young man named Pat, who became a part of our family, and that led to the birth of their son, Patrick. Brittany, from the beginning, was an amazing mom. Everything was about him. She was so full of love and so full of compassion. I think all the years of being a big sister, an older sibling to 5 children, the 4 younger siblings, she was the oldest. I think that gave her some practice in helping out at home, but he was number one in her life. Around 2 years old, Patrick became very sick with a rare lung disease called PCD, primary cilia dyskinesia. And it was many doctor's appointments, surgeries, hospital stays. And there wasn't 1 second of the day that she had left his side. She was there for every moment of it. Pat was working full-time, trying to provide for the family at that time, so he would come as soon as he got off work. He would come to be with Brittany and Patrick at the hospital or wherever they were and check on them in the morning, and she was just amazing, and there wasn't nothing that she wouldn't do for him. He was her everything, her absolutely everything. They like to go 4-wheeling and bowling, and he has dirt bikes, and she barely ever took a serious picture. Almost every picture we have of her, she has her tongue hanging out, and as you can see in the left corner, Patrick's a lot like her, always making faces and sticking his tongue out, but that was her everything, that was her whole life. So, in late 2012, early 2013, Brittany began changing her friends. All of a sudden, there was friends that she would talk to us about. She was very open and honest, and she would tell us a lot of things. Growing up, she was very, very close, and she'd talk about a lot. She wouldn't keep hardly anything from you. She started hanging out with people that previously she had told me were, abusing prescription pills or were into heroin, and all of a sudden she started changing friends. And it started April 2013 was her first arrest. She was arrested for possession of narcotics. She had a duffel bag full of pills. So that's when the arrest started. She started distancing herself from her family, from those who really loved her and cared about her. She would, all of a sudden, she would stop coming around for dinner. She would not call. She was very, very close to her little sister. That was her best friend. They did everything together. They'd go shopping together, go do their nails together, and they were constantly together all the time. Next thing you know, she was started to distance herself. She distanced herself from those that truly loved her, and all of a sudden was only hanging around those that she knew would either use with her or sell to her or enable her. She became very good at convincing people that she was clean. She would go for periods of time where she would do okay, 6 to 8 months at a time with the prescription pills, and she would go for long periods of time where she would seem to be okay, and then she would stop being around those friends that were using or enabling, and she would come back around the family, and then she'd distance herself again, and she'd start drifting away again. In November of 2014 is when her first arrest came from heroin. She came clean to us about everything. She opened up about the heroin, and she had started using just a few months before that. She said she had used 3 times by the time that she got arrested. She wanted to get help. She was desperate to get clean. She got out of Cook County Jail. There's a letter up here that while she was in Cook County, there was another girl in there that was struggling from addiction, And she wrote this letter to Brittany while she was in there, and she told her if she's not too far gone, she could still be saved. And Brittany was gung-ho, she was ready to come clean, she was ready to get help. Those are actually, you can see the watermarks, those are actually from Brittany's tears. She was desperate to do better. And for a few weeks, she sought all kinds of treatment. She called several different places. Some places she was trying to consider about maybe trying to see if Patrick could come with her because she didn't want to be away from him. She called several different facilities. We were trying to help her, trying to, get her help. But it just seems like no matter which way we go, no matter which way we went, nothing would come together. And she slowly sank back into despair and became arrested several times from January 2015 to April 2015. From 2013 to 2015, there was nearly a dozen arrests, most of those coming just in those short 4 months. In January of 2015, she claimed that she was ready to go for treatment, and she was dropped off at a detox center in Chicago. And yeah, Pat took her and dropped her off to try to get her help. He was also trying to do everything he could do on his side. The last thing he wanted to do was take a son away from a mother, or he was trying everything to save her also. But in January 20th of 2015, she was drove to a detox center and portrayed to be there for 23 days. But in reality, she was there for less than 24 hours, and she walked out and went to a drug house where she was using up to 10 bags of heroin a day, even shooting heroin into her neck. Her friends tried to go and rescue her over there. They had her meet them at the local restaurant and called the ambulance to come and called the police to come. But because she was of her right mind, she was able to sign for release. But it came to ultimately Pat had to file for temporary custody of their son in January, and so she lost custody of him, and she would tell us that at that time she said that that's what she felt was best because she needed to get herself better and she needed to get herself clean. So here is someone whose whole world was her son, and now she had sank so far that she ended up losing custody of him. She was court-ordered into treatment 2 times after losing custody, once on April 1st and again on April 13th, but no beds were available. She died just 11 days later on April 24th, 2015 of a heroin overdose. After the death, we decided to put it in her obituary, the cause of death. Most were supportive, but others claimed very cruel comments, things like heroin is just population control, and they hope the scumbags just die with a needle in their arm. Other hurtful things, most of the time, it was definitely things that were supportive of us and saying thank you for trying to do what was best. But Brittany wasn't any of those things. She was an amazing, beautiful person, always helping others in need. She knew a few young mothers who she was always right by their sides, always helping them, trying to pick them up and encourage them. She knew other addicts that came to us after her death and said, I'm clean, I'm here, I'm alive because of Brittany. She was completely against drugs growing up. She never wanted to be that girl. She was a person, a daughter, a sister, a mother, a beautiful life with a beautiful family that loved her. I just want to share one brief story with you before we come to a close, and I'm going to read a poem at the end. When Brittany was around 10 years old, this kind of goes back to the wood ducks in our yard. We were having a birthday party at our house, and there was a mother wood duck hen screeching very loudly off in the woods. probably trying to call the babies out of the tree. And the whole group of young children thought that it may have been a child in the woods. And so they all came up to the house, and we knew that it was a wood duck screeching, but they did not. So we said, why don't you go in a group together, travel in safety? Why don't you guys go and investigate what it is? So we sent them off to go investigate, and the closer they got, the louder the screeching got. So they all took off running across our backyard, and they were all running to go to the house. And right in the middle of the yard, Brittany came to a dead stop, and she turned around and by herself took off into those woods to save that child. She was convinced that she was going to rescue someone who was being hurt. She turned around and ran as fast as she could to take off, and once she got into the woods, noticed that it was a mother wood duck hen. But she didn't know that when she went to go in there. Her strength and her determination kept her going, and that was the Brittany that we know. She spent her life trying to save others, but she couldn't save herself. I'd like to read a poem now, wrote by Brandy Marie Ridgely, Brittany's little sister. Beautiful person, perfect, a person everybody loves with a passion, just what I'm looking for. No one will suspect them to be my next victim. I'll start off slow, creeping in. No one will suspect a thing. I'll slowly take them into my grip, slowly distancing them. Then once they notice what I'm doing, I'll take them completely away. I'll keep them, there's no going back. Once I have them in my grip, they are mine. I'll whisper in their ear every hour, second, and day, telling them they are mine until they fall under my spell, until I know for sure that I have them and they are mine. It's about addiction. I'd like to thank you for your time.
As I said, that was a very difficult story for me to take when I was going over the PowerPoint presentation, because I had a 2-year-old at home. And seeing all those pictures with the cheerleading and the chorus and the volleyball, I mean, that's everything I want my daughter to do in her life. But we've had several meetings in my office before we went over this PowerPoint presentation. I'm just going to ask you a couple questions here about things we went over. But what would you say to a parent who does not think that heroin is readily available in our community? How did Brittany get her hand on the drugs?
Some locally, others she would drive to Bolingbrook or Cicero, so it was definitely within driving distance. So if it wasn't something that she could pick up from a friend locally, which she did that also several times.
It's everywhere. It's next door. It's right down the street. It's very popular. They'll have one car drive to Cicero with multiple people, and that's how they split the cost. And it's way worse than what the public realizes. From what Brittany told us, the facts.
And one of the things we also discussed in my office was, one of the things I wanted to get out of this presentation was, what are some of the symptoms that a parent should look for when they're trying to determine if somebody is using heroin? Because as we all know, as Tim will discuss, I mean, addicts are ultimately self-admitted liars. I mean, they're manipulators, they're controlled, they can control people, and they can sound really convincing when they say they're not using the drugs. Can you go over some of the symptoms that you recognized when you realized she was using drugs? And specifically, we talked about the one incident with cereal.
She would become very lethargic. She would be sitting at the kitchen table, reading her phone, and fall asleep. One time she came in and passed out with her face in a bowl of cereal on the kitchen, or in the living room. And you would wake her up and you'd say, Brittany, what are you doing? Oh, I had to stay up late last night. You know, Patrick didn't sleep very well. It was always an excuse to why she was so tired. She didn't get any sleep. Or she would also go into the bathroom for about an hour and a half, and you would be knocking on the door, and you would have to knock repeatedly to get her to answer. So changing friends. Didn't care about her appearance anymore. She would at one point always have her hair done and her nails done, and toward the end it just was hair up. Would hardly take care of herself at all. Very small pupils. Yeah, and the ultimate thing was then distancing herself from her family, and then ultimately her son. So that's when it got really bad.
Just to wrap this up, my last question would be the treatment options, the availability of those options. A lot of people think that, well, if somebody's using heroin and there's serious consequences, serious negative consequences that are coming from using drugs, why doesn't treatment work the first time? Why do we have to have repeated admissions to intensive outpatient and treatment options? Why does treatment not work? Why is it so difficult?
There's not a lot of options out there. There's limited resources. We kept a logbook of all the facilities that we called, and all the people we talked to, and all the programs we had to jump through with. And another thing too is all the multiple arrests, nearly a dozen arrests. She was only court ordered once. At the very end, in the same month that she passed away. So I have to say it's just limited. There's just not many places to go. We found one facility in California that had a bed available. But that quickly, the door closed on that very fast. And then we lost the will to get the treatment that she needed. We had an opportunity and we lost it at that time.
I don't have any questions anymore. The Ridgeleys will be available to talk to them after the presentation if you want to come up here and offer them words of encouragement, because it was heroic coming here tonight to share your story. Thank you for coming tonight. Our next speaker tonight is Tim Ryan, and he runs a Man in Recovery Foundation, and he's from Dope to Hope. Join me in welcoming Tim Ryan.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Paula, for putting this together. I commend you guys. I know it's very difficult to get up here and do what you do. First off, I want to take a moment of silence for the sick and suffering addicts still out there lost in addiction, and the ones that have passed on. Tim Ryan, grade 4 recovering alcoholic and drug addict. I also go by R68915, that's my Illinois Department of Prison number. Been in the Illinois Department of Corrections a couple times, probably been in county jails 30 different times, from Monroe, Louisiana, to Austin, Texas, to Buffalo, New York, to Los Angeles, Kendall County. No, never made it to Kendall. DuPage, Will, McHenry, Cook a number of times. To me, that was normal. I grew up with a great family, little town, Crystal Lake, Illinois. My dad worked for a company by the name of Hutton. Worked there 26 years, never took off a day of work. Senior vice president, ran the whole country. My mother helped found the company in 1974 by the name of Market Day. We were latchkey kids. They were at work. We came home, we let ourselves in the house. Every night at 6:30 we had dinner together. My mom and dad couldn't have kids, they adopted 4 of us. I said, next time do it right, you pick 3 alcoholics. But my little brother and sister, a 3/4 Chippewa Indian, yeah, they're definitely alcoholics. My younger brother's sober, my sister's still in active addiction. I grew up on a lake. I like to fish, I like to sail, I like to canoe. In the winter I like to go out and play hockey. I was always outside. We had a field about a half mile from our house. My dad would take us out, we'd shoot guns, we'd shoot skeet, we'd shoot pheasant. You know, I was an outdoors person. I was an avid water skier. But what I lacked was self-esteem. I had ADD, I had dyslexia. When I was in school, I was in all the slow classes. My grade point average in high school was 1.4. On my ACT, I took it 4 times. I think my best score was an 11. So school and I didn't get along too well. When I did fit in, I fit in with alcohol and drugs. I graduated high school in '86. In 1982, the one thing I was really good at was water skiing. From 16 to 21 years old, I was one of the top ranked barefoot water skiers in the country. In I-3 event, I show skied. I did a stint at SeaWorld in Cypress Gardens. I skied with the Aqua Nuts up in Twin Lakes. But outside of that, flipping pizzas, drinking beer, and doing drugs is what I was good at. And shooting my mouth off. I had a great mouth. But at 14 years old, my best friend was a senior in high school, Randy. We lived down the lake together. We're both blonde hair, blue eyes, 6'1". His birthday's 9/18/65, my birthday's 9/19/68. 333-648-217 is his social security number, don't remember that. I assumed his identity. So we'd go up to Lake Geneva drinking at 14 years old. Every weekend I was up in Wisconsin drinking booze, because the drinking age was 18. And I'd always sleep at Randy's house. I don't think my parents realized I was drunk the first time until I was 15 years old, vomiting profusely in the bathroom. And I remember my dad saying he's going to go talk to Randy's dad. Randy's dad was sergeant of police in Crystal Lake. So we got away with whatever we wanted to. I can remember getting pulled over drunk in a car. Oh, I'm Randy Demir. They'd let me go. That's the way I thought I could get out of things. You know, my connections in life. Also at 15 years old, tried a drug by the name of cocaine. First time I tried it, I fell in love with it. My high school Mondays, I'd be planning on where I'm getting booze and drugs on Friday, and who's having the party. Because school, I wasn't interested in school. I was interested in girls, I was interested in working and making money, and I was interested in partying. Because when I started drinking and doing drugs, I fit in. I could drop the masks. I could get out of my learning disabilities and my ADD and my insecurity, and I felt comfortable. I kind of felt like the big guy on campus. I made it through high school. I went down to college in Louisiana, Northeast Louisiana University in Monroe, for a couple reasons. They had the best water ski team in the country. Whoever thought colleges had collegiate water skiing, they did. The drinking age was 18, 3-to-1 girl to guys, and I could hunt and fish. I'm going to Louisiana. When I got down to Louisiana, man, I started drinking right away, partying. It was interesting because one of my best friends down there, Darius, he said, Tim, within 4 months of being down here, you have more friends than I do, and I grew up here. I can meet anywhere, anyone, anywhere, anytime. I love people. And I can fit in with any crowd. I can fit in with a millionaire, I can fit in with a billionaire, I can fit in with the homeless people. I am the ultimate chameleon. I'm the best liar, cheat, and thief in the world. I will look you right in the eyes and lie dead center to you. At least I used to, I won't anymore. Down in college, in 1986, when I went down there in '85, a drug by the name of ecstasy was legal. They sold it in bars in Texas. So you go into a bar and they'd have a button on that said X, you could buy it. They made it illegal, but there was still mass quantities of it. Professionally made by pharmacists and chemists. So what did we do? We started running drugs. We'd go to Dallas or Houston every other weekend, pick up 5,000 hits of X that we were paying $1 for, and come back and sell them for 15, 20 bucks a hit. So we're making a lot of money, and we're spending all the money doing cocaine, crystal meth, whatever. I absolutely learned nothing in college. When I did try to apply myself, I failed English 101 3 times. I just can't get it. Who can spell the word there? Who's a good speller? Spell it. There's 3 different ways to spell it. To this day, I still can't tell you which one to use in a sentence. I was there, I'm going there. Hell, I don't know, I don't care. I really can't. A verb, pronoun, I know a noun's a person, place, or thing. I I ended up dropping out of college, came back to Crystal Lake, did some odd jobs here and there, and I really got bad into cocaine. And I was hanging out with an older gentleman. We were going to Chicago at the time. We were buying the drugs from the Colombians. We'd buy an ounce or two every day, come back, just like you were talking about with the heroin. We'd sell half of it and pay for it. And then I started smoking cocaine. I was smoking upwards of an ounce of cocaine a day, drinking like a fish. I was working at a place called Fredder's in West Dundee selling stereo equipment. And I remember I didn't like living the way I was living. So I got on the phone and started researching treatment centers. And I got a hold of a place in Mundelein, Illinois called Parkside Lodge. So I drove up there. I wanted to check myself in. And they kind of walked me around, showed me. They let me come in and sit on their group. There was like 30 people, and I sat in. And that's kind of cool. What they're trying to do is get a hold of my parents to run my insurance or let them know I was there. And I had $400 in my pocket. I said, you know, maybe I don't want to do rehab. Maybe I'm going to get out of here. So I left. Went on another run for a week. Stole some checks from my brother, from my mom. And one of my buddies owned a gas station that I went and wrote a $500 check at on my brother's account. And he called my parents and said, you better do something about Tim. He's going to die. My parents confronted me, and the next day my younger brother, drove me back to Parkside Lodge. And I checked into treatment. And I was by far the youngest person in there. I just turned 21 in September, and this was February 2nd. I went in on my parents' wedding anniversary. And I can remember in treatment, the first thing I really remember, I'm in detox. And they have speakers or people in AA or NA come in to speak with you. First cat that walks in my room, I look at him, I said, Pat, what are you doing here? It was a buddy of mine from high school that disappeared. He said, Tim, this is what I do, I'm sober. So what are you talking about? He said, after high school, I went to college, and I drank myself almost to death, and I went and checked myself into treatment. I'm 3 years sober now. I'm like, well, what are you doing here? He said, well, this is what I do. I come in and share my experience, strength, and hope. So we talked about the old days, and he left, and I couldn't figure out what he was doing there. Someone like me came in and spoke when I was in the treatment center. There was 38 of us. 11 of them were Chicago cops, and I thought they had the problem. And this speaker came up and spoke, and he said, one of you will be sober in a year. And I said, what'd you say? He said, one of you will be sober in a year. I said, man, there's 38 of us. He said, son, listen to me. One will be. I said, what do I do? He said, don't drink and go to those 12-step meetings. I said, okay, so that's what I did. I got out and I went home, and those damn Al-Anon people got to my mom and dad. My dad sits me down and he says, Tim, you know, my dad was senior vice president of EFHUT, he ran the whole country. He said, Tim, I couldn't work, I couldn't sleep, I didn't know what I did wrong as a father, and I respected my dad, and I still do to this day more than anything. I said, Dad, you didn't do anything. You and Mom are the greatest parents in the world. He said, Tim, I didn't cause it, I can't cure it, and I can't control this disease you have. And I sure am not going to contribute to it. You're welcome to stay in the house, but if you drink or do drugs again, you're gone. I said, okay, cool. I started going to those 12-step meetings. I walked into the bank, I borrowed $10,000 on my signature. I went and started an asphalt seal coating business. I ran a barefoot water ski school on the Fox River, and my life was good. But by far, I was the youngest person going to those meetings. I parked my pickup truck around back because it said Ryan Seal Coat Specialist on the side, because I was embarrassed to go to those 12-step meetings. I didn't want people knowing I was going there. I can remember my back was hurting again, and I went to go see this Dr. Wu. And I explained to him, and he said, well, here, you need some Percocets, you need this. I said, no, I can't. There's a whole lobby full of people. And he said, what'd you say? And I said, man, I'm a drug addict. What do you mean you're a drug addict? And I was so embarrassed, the shame, the guilt, the stigma, and I ended up walking out of there. Ultimately went to a Grateful Dead concert, probably wasn't the best idea. And I bought a poster and a fatty for $7. And I relapsed. You know what? I was never in recovery, because relapse is not part of the journey. That's the biggest fallacy out there. Oh, I relapsed, it's part of the journey. That was my excuse. Oh, I relapsed again, I got a disease, so I'm gonna go use again. That's the biggest crock of crap in the world. Relapse does not have to happen, don't be fooled. I went right back to doing cocaine, and then I figured, you know what, maybe I'll relocate. So I packed up, moved down to Austin, Texas with my best friend. But what I didn't realize is, wherever you go, there you are. Wherever you go, there you are. Whether I live in Ottawa, I live in LaSalle, Peru, I live in Morris, I live in Naperville, I live in Australia. I'm still sitting there with the same thoughts in my head and the same issues. Down in Texas, I screwed over my best friend with some credit card fraud. He found out, kicked me out of his house, filed charges, ended up in the jail there, got bailed out, and it turns out the lady that used to babysit me was the state's attorney in Austin, Texas, Travis County, and got me out of that one, and I started going back to those 12-step meetings. Met a bunch of guys marketing cable television door to door, and man, we traveled all over the country doing it. A year later, I started my own business doing it. 6 months later, I got 60 people working for me. I'm making $20,000 a week. My life is great, and I went right back to doing cocaine and drinking. And I buried that business about a year later. Came back to Crystal Lake, $250,000 in debt, owed the IRS $80,000, and went and applied for a job. Went in this guy's basement, and I saw a book. He was a headhunter. And I saw a book on the counter, and it said, "A New Pair of Glasses." And I said, man, I remember that book, I think from one of those AA meetings I was at. And I asked the guy, I said, are you in recovery? He said, yeah, I'm 7 years clean and sober. I said, really? So am I. I'm not 7 years, but great. So Bob ended up hiring me, and I was a technology recruiter. I learned the business very quickly. I made a lot of money. But about 6, 7 months in, Bob realized I wasn't sober. I was drinking, back doing drugs. I made it about 1.5 years, and I went to work for a management consulting firm, one of our clients. I very quickly progressed up the ladder. I was very good at what I did. Making money was easy to me. But as my father tried to teach me, Tim, you make interest, you don't pay interest. I could never figure out that concept. That's why he retired at 51, and I'm 47, starting all over. But that's okay. At the management consulting firm, I met the lady that was the secretary there. I took her down to the bar for a drink, and I wanted to take her out on a date. So I asked Shannon out on a date, and she said, do you do drugs? I said, no, why? I said, because I've got a 3-year-old son who had a deadbeat dad that's a drug addict, and I want nothing to do with anyone that does drugs. I said, I don't do drugs. I said, okay, cool, we'll go out on a date. She went back to Naperville, I went to Chicago and bought some cocaine. We started dating. 3 months later, she was pregnant. 3 months after that, we did the courthouse wedding. Then she is stuck with me. I adopted Nick, we had Max. 9 months later, she's pregnant with Tanner. Had Tanner. 9 months later, she's pregnant with Abby. Good Irish Catholics. You're supposed to laugh at that. But anyhow, about 1.5 years in, Shannon, we've got a townhouse in Naperville. I started my first executive search firm with a good high school buddy of mine. It's before the dot-com bust. I mean, I think our first year we did $1.8 million. Money's going in. I'm partying, do what I want. And Shannon was kind of stuck with me. She's pregnant, got Max, got Nick. She's at home. I'm gone all the time. And I'd been up doing cocaine for 3 days, and I crashed. And I woke up, and Max was crawling into my office. So I went and picked him up, put him back in his room, and I walked into my office, and there was cocaine all over the floor. If my son would have picked up one of those rocks of cocaine, it would have killed him. So that scared the daylight out of me, and I went back to those 12-step meetings, and I really plugged in. And made it about 1 year. But again, I never got a sponsor, I never worked the steps, I never did anything because my ego and pride were so big. I didn't need to take those suggestions. Just going to meetings was keeping me sober, and things were good. And I had started working for my old boss. He started another management consulting firm. I was working out of my house. And I met a guy, Joel, at one of those meetings. And Joel was about my age. And we got talking, and it turns out 10 years prior, he had worked for a company in Chicago delivering packages called On Time Courier. And I said, hey, did you go know a guy by the name of Darius with the red pickup truck? He goes, yeah, that damn hillbilly from Louisiana. I said, yeah. He goes, how do you know Darius? I said, he's my best friend in college. I dragged him up here 10 years ago. So Joel and I hit an instant bond. Joel asked me to take him to Chicago a week later to move out of his apartment. I did that. And his roommate was doing heroin. I'm 1 year clean and sober. I was actually abstinent because I wasn't living recovery. And his roommate said, you want to try it back? Yeah, I'll try one. That's all it took. one bag of heroin. I don't glamorize heroin, but I liked what it did to me. Very quickly, that $10 a day habit turned into a $500 a day habit. I was actively addicted to heroin for 12 years. I tried methadone, I tried Suboxone, I tried treatment a number of times. Shannon was actually trying to send me to Tibet to live with the Buddhist monks to get me off of heroin. And you gotta realize this is 10 years ago. There wasn't near the opportunity and resources there is now. And you're right, there's not a lot of treatment options. Our state's broke. We'll get to that. But anyhow, things are going out of control. 2008, I was sentenced to prison for the first time. I'd got 4 driving on revokes a year prior. Who gets pulled over by the same Chicago cop twice, 8 months apart? I do. Where was I going every time I got pulled over? By heroin. See, I always thought I was untouchable. I thought I'd buy my way out of everything. I'll just hire a good lawyer, no big deal. I do another 2-3 weeks in Cook County Jail. I got out of prison, and I remember back then they give you a year, but you do 61 days. And I got out of prison, and I remember Shannon saying, Tim, I just want a full ride scholarship to nursing school. I said, you don't need to work. She said, Tim, the way you're living, you're going to end up in 2 places. You're going to end up dead or back in prison. We got 4 kids to take care of. That lady graduated top of her class in 3 years. You think I showed up at her graduation? Nah, I was dope sick. Where my addiction ultimately took me was December 16th of 2010. Shannon was having a big party the next day for all the girls from nursing school. She was up taking a shower, and I came downstairs and her coat was hanging on the chair, and there was a big wad of money in the pocket. So I grabbed that money, snuck the van out, drove down to Chicago to buy some heroin. She's calling me the whole way. I know what you're doing, come back, come back. No, I'm going to get Ariel out of jail, because everything that came out of my mouth was a lie. Went down to Chicago, bought some heroin, snorted a few bags of my dealers, pulled over at North Avenue and Grand at the McDonald's. I said, I'll just shoot up 4 or 5 bags. And I did that. I put my rigs away, sat there, all right, I'm not dead, and I started driving. I remember waking up on a stretcher being wheeled into West Suburban Hospital with the police officer yelling at me, you son of a bitch, you just killed 2 people. I didn't kill 2 people, but I did put 4 people in the hospital. The police officer was so pissed off that another heroin addict overdosed while driving and hit 2 cars. And I totaled the cars, I totaled our van, and I put 4 people in the hospital. And I don't remember a damn thing. That was my 7th overdose. When I was fighting that case, my brilliant lawyer decided to put the paramedic on the stand because they never found the syringes or any drugs on me. And they never got urine because I got myself checked out of the hospital because I was so smart and I wanted to go to jail. But I remember when they put that paramedic on the stand, my lawyer says, how do you know my client was under the influence of heroin? And the man says, I've been a paramedic 20 years. I've dealt with over 10,000 overdoses in Chicago. He said, your client was absolutely on heroin, and he was dead. He said, when I pulled up to the car, your client was out 5 to 8 minutes. He was blue, his tongue was sticking out of his mouth, and his eyes were rolled back in his head. And I had to administer Narcan. One time it didn't work. I administered it a 2nd time. It didn't work. I administered Narcan a 3rd time. It didn't work. He said, then I looked at the battalion chief and said, call the coroner, this one's gone. He said, for some reason I tried it under your client's tongue and we got a slight pulse and we rushed him to the hospital. He said, yeah, it was definitely a heroin overdose. 7 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections. That's where my addiction took me. But prior to me going to prison, after I caught that case, I knew I was going. All bets were off. I wanted to die, but I was too much of a chicken to put a gun in my mouth. But I'm shooting $500 worth of heroin in my arm every day. When you do opiates, you get profusely sick if you don't have them. Many of you know that because you either have a loved one struggling with addiction or you know of someone. It's like having the flu times 1,000. And I was in the bath taking a hot bath, and my 17-year-old son walked in the bathroom. He said, "What's wrong, Pops?" And I looked up at him. I said, "What do you think, you idiot? I'm dope sick." And he left 2 bags of heroin on the bathroom counter. I said, "Not anymore, Dad." And I got out of that bathtub and I did those 2 bags of heroin, and I went to my son's bedroom. I said, "Nick, what the hell are you doing?" "Don't worry, Dad, I'm just selling a little bit." I said, "Nick, you need to shut this down immediately. You know what this drug has done to me." My 17-year-old son looked at me and said, "Well, Dad, you're a successful drug addict." And I said, "Why would you say that?" "Well, you got a beautiful house, you got an office in the Wrigley building, you make a good living." That's what my son thought success was. 3 months later, my 17-year-old son and I were doing heroin together. Adam Silver, stand up. Come here. Adam was my son's best friend. Adam I've known since he was 12 years old. When we moved to Oswego, Nick was one of Adam's best friends, and Zach. How did we used to spend our days together?
We would drive to Chicago, and I was trying heroin for the first time.
Adam used to drive me to Chicago to buy heroin. Adam and I and Zach were driving back one day. Zach was driving, Adam was in the passenger seat. Adam was 2 years older than Nick, so he was 19 at the time. I said, "You want to try it back?" He said, "Yeah, I'll try one." That's what I did to my son's best friend. I turned him into a fucking junkie. That's what this disease of addiction will do. I ended up going to prison. Adam went to rehab after struggling. I did 13 and a half months in the Illinois Department of Corrections. By the grace of God, I got to Stateville. You can go sit down, Adam. We'll bring you back up. I went to Sheridan Correctional Center, which is, in Illinois, we have 28 prisons. We have 1 drug treatment program. That's it. Southwestern is now shut down. 80% of the people in prison are for drug-related crimes. Our system's broken. If you take a cancer patient, put them in jail for a year and release them, you think they're cured of cancer? No. Take a drug addict, you put him in jail for a year and release him, you think he's cured of drug addiction? Absolutely not. They're going to go right back to doing drugs. That's what we know what to do. Prison broke me. It humbled me. Saved my life. In prison, my wife divorced me after 18 years. I lost our beautiful house in foreclosure. I displaced my family. In Sheridan, you do 30 days in one building, you do 30 in another, and then you go to your final building. When I got to my final building and walked in my cell, there's this big black guy sitting in there. And I walked into my cell, I said, "Hey, what's up?" He looks up from his bunk, reading a book. He said, "Hey, Whitey, you into recovery?" I said, "Yeah, why?" He said, "Because if not, you ain't coming in this cell, brother. That's all we do." I said, "I'm into recovery." He said, "Hi, I'm Big Perk." I said, "I'm Tim." He said, "I think I'll call you Powder." I said, "You call me whatever you want, my friend." Big Perk was chief of the Universal Ice Lords for 25 years. One of the most ruthless street gangs in the world. He did bad things. He dealt mass quantities of drugs. But you know what? He had surrendered. By the time I got into that cell with him 3 months earlier, his son had been shot, killed on the west side of Chicago. And he had to deal with that alone. Perk had already been in prison 2.5 years. We read the AA Big Book, we read the Bible, we read the NA Basic Text, we worked the steps. We're locked in that cell 18 hours a day. That man knows me better than most people know me. He'd write letters to my son Nicholas, who was still out there struggling. We did whatever we could to help each other. In the day room at night, we'd sit on a bench and have an AA meeting. We didn't play dominoes, we didn't do push-ups, we didn't watch MTV Raps, we bettered ourselves. When I walked out of prison, my ex-wife picked me up, and Shannon brought 2 of our kids to see me every 2 weeks. That's how I did my time. I watched the corn grow, and I counted on getting those visits. But I had to change my thinking. When I got into prison, I shut everything off. I never expected to get any mail. I never expected to get a visit. And if I called, I never expected anyone to pick up. So if they did pick up the phone, it was a blessing. If I did get a visit, it was a blessing. And if I got some mail, it was a blessing. So I had to shift the way I thought about everything. When I walked out of prison, Shannon and my mom found a little townhouse for me in downtown Naperville. I still don't drive. I want to have a driver's license for another 5 years. I got Kyle the kid, he's my full-time driver today. He's almost 11 months sober. He was sitting out, where are you at, Kyle the kid? Put your hand up, stand up, Kyle the kid. That's a recovering heroin addict right there. He's sick today though, or he's playing sick because he doesn't want to talk. You know the cool thing about recovery? Adam, how old are you? 22. Kyle the kid, how old are you? 19. I'm 47. Those are two of my best friends in the world. Why? Because we got this common bond, this disease of addiction. And you know what? We stay sober together. We pull each other up. We help each other out. When I got out of prison, Shannon got me that place for 3 reasons. So I could walk to the AA club, so I could walk downtown Naperville to go get coffee or grocery store, and so I could walk to the train to go to work. Within 3 weeks out, I had a sponsor, I walked the steps again, I got a job back in the management consulting space. I'd take a train from Naperville to Chicago, I'd walk over to Ogilvie, I'd take a train from Ogilvie out to Palatine, I'd take a bus 3 miles to my office, I'd work, I'd do that routine back. That was a 4.5-hour commute every day. I'd go to the 8 o'clock AA meeting every night, and I'd come home. And that lasted about 3 months. I didn't want to do it. I had no passion. While I was in prison, Perk and I started writing a business plan for my foundation. I started writing my plan for Man in Recovery Foundation in prison. I knew I was done drinking and using. That was over. I wanted to figure out how to help other people so they didn't have to get sober the way I did in prison. 18 months sober, my 20-year-old son Nicholas is still struggling with addiction. So I went to go see him in Gateway. Did 5 stints in Gateway, 1 stint in Rosecrans. Nick loved treatment, absolutely loved it. He got kicked out of high school, he did 7 months up in Gateway when he was 16. And I can remember calling him up and saying, hey, get your GED, I'll give you $1,000. He calls me a month later, he said, hey Dad, you got my $1,000? I said, what are you talking about? He said, I got 98% on my GED. I said, you gotta be shitting me. He said, nope, come look. Nick was a smart kid. Almost too smart for his own good though. He didn't want to apply himself when he got out. He loved treatment. The last time Nick was in treatment, he didn't want to leave. And I didn't know that. But I went in to visit Nick and I said, hey Nick, I'm 18 months sober, you're back here. There's a lot of good things we could do. Yeah, Dad, I know. And man, one of the best conversations I had with him. Nick got out of Gateway. 30 days later, he's back in Cook County Jail. Got busted with his girlfriend trying to sell fake pills to buy heroin. He did 30 days in Cook County. I talked to him every day. Best phone calls I had with my son. I put some money on his books because I've been in the joint. I know what it's like. Need some noodles, need some shampoo. That little creep went and spent all that commissary money on a tattoo on his arm that said, YOLO, you only live once. Always finag on me. He got out 30 days later. They transferred him to Kane County for another 15 days because he had overdosed once before, spit in an ambulance driver's face, got another assault charge or assault of a peace officer, did 15 days there and he got out. And his mom picked him up and took him to lunch and bought him lunch and said, Nick, that's it, we're done. You're not going to Dad's house, you're not coming to my house, and you're not going to your grandmother's house. Oh, don't worry, my girlfriend's picking me up, we got all these plans, blah, blah, blah. 5 days later, I talked to Nick. And I said, hey Nick, come to my house and get some Narcan. I'm a certified Narcan trainer and some other people are here. I said, Dad, don't worry, I'm not on that BS anymore. Second mistake of my life. All right. 2 days later, Shannon called me at 6:30 in the morning and said, I'm coming to pick you up. Nick overdosed again. I don't really tell people this part of the story. Shannon picked me up, we're driving down the 88, because I thought we were going to Good Sam Hospital versus Hinsdale, otherwise I would have taken Ogden. But I plugged my cell phone into her car charger and it was wired into her car. And a song came on instantaneously by the band 6 AM. which is Nikki Sixx's band from Motley Crue. And he had wrote this in conjunction with his book called The Heroin Diaries. In their first album, Courtesy Call, Girl with the Golden Eyes, Beautiful, is all about heroin in some way, shape, or form. I plugged in my cell phone and on came a song, Courtesy Call. Courtesy Call is a song about someone overdosing and dying. I unplugged it instantaneously. We got to Hinsdale Hospital, walked in, Tim and Shannon Ryan here to see our son Nicholas. He overdosed, and 30 seconds later the chaplain walked out. I knew the cards were up. My son succumbed to a heroin overdose. I'll ask people, I knew my son was dead. What was my next thought? No students had heard me today. Parents, what was my next thought? Anyone? Did I want to go get high? Never. My next thought was I'm going to be at 6 o'clock AA meeting that night, and that's what I did. That obsession and compulsion had been lifted. My son died on my 21-month sobriety date. I went to an AA meeting that night. And I went to one the next day, and the next day. And some days I went to 3 of them, because I needed to be around the people that think like me, that can understand. There's some ladies that run a group in Naperville called PATH, Positive Acceptance Towards Healing, in conjunction with Linden Oaks facility in Plainfield. Those ladies had mothers bring food to my house for 2 weeks straight for my other son and I. I'm indebted to those people. Kirsten, my better half there, put her life on hold for me. And she's holding my other miracle right there, Mackenzie, my 8-week-old daughter. Right, Mackenzie? It's a true blessing to have a kid clean and sober today, because those are all the things I missed in my world of addiction. After Nick passed on, I talked to my former wife a week later. And Shannon and I are still best friends. And I'm talking to Shannon, she said, Tim, I hate God. I'm so pissed off at God. I said, what are you talking about? She said, he didn't answer my prayers. I said, Shannon, what I'm going to say to you is going to sting, but I need you to listen. I said, maybe God did answer your prayers, it's just not the answer you were looking for. She said, what are you talking about? I said, well, in our eyes, we thought Nick could get sober. We thought he'd get married, have a good life. It wasn't God's will. God called him home. Since my son's died, I put 34 of his friends into treatment. Adam over there was in his second stint out of rehab, keys to recovery, and he was living in the Normandy house, which is a halfway house up in Des Plaines. Adam came down to Nick's wake, and I said, hey, I'm speaking at the Elno Club next week. Why don't you come down? Adam came to the Elno Club, and I said, why don't we go by my house and see Tanner? Because all my kids, Adam was like a second son to us. So we brought Adam over, and all of a sudden Tanner comes down and he says, hey Adam, why don't you move out of that halfway house and move in with me and my dad? Damn, that's a great idea. So Adam moved in with me and my son. Started rocking into recovery, met his better half, Liz, over there. And Adam lived with me for about 10 months. Then I shipped his ass down to Florida to go work for my treatment center. And him and Liz both went down there for 6 months. And now they just moved back and they're going to work for my new treatment center in Naperville. But there's a pure picture of recovery. Stand up again so everyone can see your pretty face, Adam. There's a heroin addict. How much time you got clean? 16 months. That's a miracle. Your life doesn't suck, does it? I know Liz is an agitator, but outside of that, it's okay. What I want people to understand is, I never grew up and wanted to be a heroin addict. I wanted to be a professional water skier. I wanted to be a stuntman. I had goals and dreams and ambitions. Guess what I started out doing? Drinking and smoking weed. Is weed a gateway drug? Hell yeah, it is. Anyone that smokes weed, I'd like to ask you a question. What the hell's so wrong with you that you need to alter your mind in the first place? Why do you gotta go home and have 4 martinis at night? You know what can make you an alcoholic? If you're sitting at work, oh man, I can't wait to get home at 5 o'clock and have those 2 martinis. Chances are you do that, probably got a drinking problem. And that's only having 2 martinis a day. It's the obsession and compulsion of the mind. Today, Kyle, how many times have you drank in your life? 3 times. These kids today, they're not even drinking. Kyle, at 13 years old, Naperville resident his entire life. Murphy Junior High was smoking a little weed with his buddies. Goes over to Naperville North at 14, 15. They're experimenting with pain pills, Xanax, Oxycontin, Vicodin, Percocet, Percodan, Loratabs. At 15 years old, Kyle's best friend Chris says, hey man, you want to try a drug called ketamine? It's an animal tranquilizer, dissociative. Trying to show me something there? What time is it? I ain't paying attention, are you? I got him off guard. So Kyle and his best friend snorted ketamine for 5 days. They blew off school, and then they ran out. Kyle went home. About 8 hours later, Kyle started getting real sick. He called his best friend Chris. He said, dude, what's going on? And Chris goes, oh, that wasn't ketamine, that was heroin. He goes, what do I do? He said, well, you're going to get really sick, so you ride that bitch out, or you get to my house with some money. Kyle, how long did it take you to get to Chris's house?
5 minutes.
About 5 minutes. From 15 to 18, Kyle's full-blown heroin addict. Snorting heroin every day. Son, I have a big misconception here. You know how many times my son shot up? Never. Never. You don't have to shoot up heroin to die. My son snorted 2 bags of heroin, and his buddy gave him a bar of Xanax. Xanax is a benzodiazepine. It suppresses your system, as does heroin. You know what happened when my son died? His friends knew he was dying. They knew he was overdosing. And you know what they did? Nothing. They propped his ass on the sofa and went in the basement and did more drugs, because they were afraid to call 911. They claimed they didn't know about the Good Samaritan law, which we'll touch on, right, Jason?
Yes.
One of the guys had a warrant, blah, blah, blah. They held all these drugs, so they propped Nick on the sofa. He was breathing. They went in the basement, got high, lost track of time, came up an hour later, and my son was dead. Then you know what they did? They put his dead body in the back seat of the car and drove around for 2 hours, afraid to go to the hospital. By the time Shan and I got to the hospital, my son had been dead 4 to 5 hours. You know how I know all this? Because the kid that let my son die walked in one of my support groups 2.5 months after my son passed. And I was running my group, and about 10 minutes in, I stopped and I said, where do I know you from? He said, I knew your son Nick. I said, really? Did you used to hang out at our house or something? He said, no. And then it hit me. Nick, dead, hospital, the kids had brought him there. I said, my son died with you. He said, your son died at my house. I sat back in my chair. I said, you know, it took a lot of stones to walk in here because you don't know me very well. He said, I know, but you're a good man and I need your help. And I said, before I help you, I need the truth. And he told me that story. So I asked Gary, I said, you know, I saw you at my son's funeral. What have you been doing since then? And he said, the next day I went and checked myself into treatment. I did a 30-day program. I'm now living in a sober home, but I'm not grasping this thing called recovery. And I said, well, what can I do to help you? He said, I'd like you to be my sponsor. And I said, yeah. That's why I live my life today. I hate the damn disease, but I love the addict. And I'll do anything in my power to help anyone, anywhere, anytime. I put on average 200 to 300 people a month into treatment. 90% of those people have no insurance or they have state insurance. I have 8 people on my team that know where we can get people in. Whether it's Gateway, it's Rosecrans, it's Chestnut, it's Abraxas, it's Haymarket, it's the Salvation Army. I'm sending them out of state. I'm sending them to Arizona. I'm the connector. We run support groups. And then when these people get out of treatment, we roll with them again. We get them plugged into recovery. We take them to AA meetings. We get them going to myopia groups. I started a second program in the United States with the Dixon Police where drug addicts can walk into the police station and turn in their drugs. And guess what? We'll put them into treatment. Little treatment center out in the lobby there by the name of Chestnut has been over backwards for Dixon, as has Gateway, as has Banyan Treatment, as has the SHARE program, as has Abraxas Interventions. There's probably a few more I've left out but I'm not remembering. We're starting the same program in Naperville. Drug addicts walk in, turn in your drugs, we'll put you into treatment, no questions asked. I said, let's take it a step further. You pull over this kid right here, or that kid, and he's got 5 bags of heroin on him. Take him to the police station, call me, call someone from my team. I'll come in and meet with that kid, and I'll give him 2 options. You're going to treatment today. I don't care if you got insurance or not, or good insurance, we're going to get you into treatment. And then you're going to go do an intensive outpatient program, and then you're going to work with a couple of our sober coaches. And oh, by the way, you're going to be drug tested. And if at the end of the year, you do well and you don't fail any drug tests, we're never filing these charges. Or you can take a class 4 felony today, 1 to 3 years. What do you want to do? We've got to start shifting our thinking on addiction. We got to drop the stigma. And damn it, we got to start talking about it. I commend this family for doing what they did with their daughter's obituary. I wish to God I would have done the same thing with my sons. You know what happened after my son's funeral? I could feel the tension with Shannon's family. So I went and met 2 weeks later with my former brother-in-law and sister-in-law. We met down at Starbucks in Naperville. And I said to him, I said, what's going on? They said, oh, it's your fault Nick died. I said, really? Yeah, you killed Nick. I said, I did. Explain that one. Well, you know, you let him smoke pot and drink in the house when he was younger, and then you guys ultimately did drugs together. And I said, I was 21 months sober the day Nick died. I said, let me ask you a question. What the hell did you and your husband do for my son when I was in prison? You didn't do a damn thing. Nothing. You knew he was in active addiction, and you did it. Nothing. Oh, you went to church. Big deal. You prayed for him. You didn't intervene, you didn't talk to him, you didn't try to help him. Well, he didn't want to listen to us. What'd you try, 1 phone call? I said, how many times did you go see Nick when he was in treatment? You never did. Did you go see him when he was in jail? No. But now he's dead, you want to blame me? I said, you know who we blame? Me, you, your husband, my former wife, my mom, my dad, your mom, and every one of his damn friends. Nobody did a damn thing. Not my problem, not my kid. You got the neighbor kid struggling, be a damn neighbor. Be your brother's keeper and go do something. At my son's memorial, August 1st, in Oswego at the skateboard park, Shannon and I had a bench made for him. We had a big memorial service for all his friends. About 150 of his buddies showed up to celebrate his life. We had a big skateboard vigil, we catered food. And about 10 of Nick's friends come up to me and say, you know what, Tim? We knew Nick smoked weed. We knew he drank. We knew he ate some X. We never knew he was doing heroin. Damn it, if we would have known, we would have done something. If we would have known you were doing it and Adam was doing it, we would have done something. You need to pull people up. You need to get involved. This is your community. And I'll promise you, this drug is destroying it. It's destroying this generation. Want to know what the youngest heroin addict I've worked with in the past year is? How old do you think? 12. 12 years old. Want to know what the oldest one is? 78. 78 years old. This drug doesn't care about color, race, creed, age, nothing. It's as simple as that. A lot of it starts with prescription pain pills. You got prescription pain pills in your closet or in your cabinet, get rid of them. Because if Adam were to come to your house and use your bathroom, he's going through your medicine cabinet. Kyle definitely would. And damn it, I would too. Because that's what addicts do. Most important thing in my life today is my relationship with my God and my recovery. Comes first. before Kirsten, my fiance, before our beautiful child, before our other 7 kids, before my friends. My recovery is #1. I still got a sponsor. I still have him work with me every 2 weeks. I go to 4 to 5 meetings a week. I sponsor 2 people, and I run a ton of support groups because it keeps me grounded. I work for a treatment center out of Florida. I'm opening a treatment center in Naperville. I run my foundation. You know how much of a salary I take from my foundation? 0. Every speaking engagement I do that I get paid for, you know how much money I take from it? Nothing. It all goes into my foundation. Every dollar in my foundation is given away to help the addicts. We're 100% volunteer driven. No foundation can say that. In time, I will need to hire a staff. We'll have no more than 15% of our operating costs run in staff. Everything else will go away, whether it's paying the $1,000 fee for the share program, whether it's getting drug test kits and giving them to families, whether it's, whose kid did I scoop off the streets of Chicago? Right there. Their daughter, I went and got a ton of clothes, belongings, tampons, makeup, toiletry, brought it to her daughter in treatment, some cigarettes. How much clean time's your daughter got now?
4 months.
4 months, friggin' miracle. How long was your daughter tied up in the court systems in this county?
Over 2 years.
Over 2 years.
She went to treatment for 23 times.
23 times. Those are the things we do. We take people from dope to hope, helping one addict at a time. I want you to know as parents, or if you're the one sitting here struggling, all you gotta do is put up your damn hand and say, I need some help. You're not alone in this. You have parents here that are coming up and sharing their experience, strength, and hope. And I promise you, they don't want anyone going through what they're going through. I don't want anyone going through what Shannon went through. Heroin took me, her husband, her beautiful house, and her firstborn child. I would not wish addiction on my worst nightmare. But if I can be standing here, if I make it to Sunday, I'll have 3 years clean and sober. I'm going to end real quick. I just had to go and have, God works in weird ways. I went and spoke at this dental hygienist club about 8 months ago. And at the end, I'm done, I'm joking about my front tooth. I said, you know, being a drug addict, I've lost half my teeth. All the cocaine and heroin, everything, booze I drank. And I said, this front tooth I super glue on. And I do. Well, I did. But anyhow, that doctor pulls me aside. He said, let me see your mouth. And I open up and he said, Jesus, criminy. He said, you know what, I'm about giving back too. He said, I'm going to give you a new set of teeth. I said, what? He said, I'm going to give you a bunch of implants. We're going to pull some teeth, crown some, I'm going to make you look like $1 million. I said, how much that can cost me? He said, nothing. I said, okay, cool. So I got me hooked up with the dentist. Well, I had to go have some oral surgery last Thursday. And he had to take out a few teeth and grind into the jaw and pack some, what's it called, cadaver bone in there and stitch it up. And that heals and my cells eat it, forms new bone. My point is, you know what I walked out of there taking? 1 ibuprofen. 1 ibuprofen. If that would have happened 3.5 years ago, man, doc, I need 50 Percocet, I need some Oxycontin, you better give me some Valium. It hurt bad for a day. Kirsten babied me, kept ice on my face. I took ibuprofen for 3 days, and that's it. So if I can get through that, you can get through anything. If I can get through the worst day of my life, my son dying from a drug overdose that I helped set in motion, I can get through anything. But I got to keep my recovery first. I got to stay grounded. I got to surrender, and I got to stay humble. The reason I do these things is to give hope. I'm a hope dealer today. That's it. I'm not a clinician, and there's some damn good ones sitting in this room right now. You can have a life beyond your wildest dreams. If little punk Adam can be 16 months sober, and Kyle the kid can be coming up on 11 months at 19 years old. I appreciate each and every one of you coming out tonight. There's plenty of people out here. There's plenty of information. We can sit here and bitch about the system, or or you can step up and be part of the solution. What are you actually doing in your community today? Think about that. Jason's getting up. He wants me to sit down. Have a blessed evening.
I really wasn't trying to
That's
make
okay.
a call to the bullpen. I really wasn't. But I just had a handful of questions that I'm sure the public wants to have answered here. Some of the questions were, with all the drugs that you've used, with alcohol and cocaine, why was heroin so powerful, and why did you fall in love with it from the first use?
As I say earlier, I don't glamorize any drug. I was running from my problems, and my solutions were drugs and alcohol. But the heroin, the first time I did it, it gave me a euphoric effect, and I think I'd always been looking for that feeling. But I was so broken inside, that became my cure. What people need to understand, though, as you mentioned earlier, people's perception of a heroin addict is a homeless person in Chicago with a needle in their arm. Now, that was a heroin addict 30 years ago when they came back from Vietnam. And do you know why they had a needle in their arm? Because the heroin was only 10 to 14% pure. The heroin today that I could buy in Morris, Illinois, after going from Chicago to Cicero to Bolingbrook and getting stepped on and getting here and getting cut some more, is still probably 50 to 70% pure. The heroin that's killed all these people in the past 3-4 weeks with the fentanyl, 75 overdoses in 72 hours. They had 6 more deaths in Naperville. They had 7 more up in the Crystal Lake, McHenry County area. Another kid died last night in Princeton. Streeters had a few, you know, here. One match tip of fentanyl will kill 10 people. One match tip. And the gangs are cutting it with it. The reason they cut the heroin with the fentanyl is to make it more pure. You know what a drug addict does? When you go down to Chicago and they're buying dope, hey, where's the good dope at? Man, people are dying over there. Shit, that's where I'm going to get my drugs. That's the way addicts think, unfortunately. You are playing a game of Russian roulette. You never know what you are getting.
And you also mentioned to us today that there's 3 individuals from the Minooka area that died within a week. Is that accurate?
Yep, absolutely. But people don't talk about this. I get messaged through Facebook, through phone calls. People let me know this kid died, that kid died. But a lot of this isn't publicized. It's not in the newspapers, not our town, not our community. They don't want people knowing about it. Unfortunately, they talk about, hey, we've had 72 Narcan saves. That's a great thing, and Narcan's a tool to save a life, but how many of those people are sober today?
Now, as far as the heroin addiction and drug addiction, how were you able to mask that from Shannon for one to a year and a half?
Shannon was raising little babies like Kirsten right now. Hold that little Mackenzie up. Hold up little Mackenzie Love. That's what my world is about, Mackenzie Love. You know, Shannon had Nick, who was a little tyrant, ADD kid. Then she had Max, and then she's pregnant. Man, I'd get home at 9, 10 at night. I'm out the door at 5:30, 6 in the morning. On the weekends, I was sleeping half the time because I was drinking so much, or I was out and about. I was never there. I wasn't around. She raised our kids. I look at family photos, I don't remember things. But she was stuck in it. You know, I asked her, when she came in to visit me in prison, I said, Shannon, why didn't you put your foot down? Why didn't you do anything? She said, I was tied to you. I was afraid to. I didn't know what people were thinking. It's a stigma. I said, why didn't you tell my parents? My dad would have come and beat my ass, taken you and the kids and left. Said, I was afraid to.
Now, as far as the Good Samaritan Law, let's just discuss that real briefly. The Good Samaritan Law was passed a couple of years ago, which basically allowed that an individual be immune from prosecution if they called in an overdose. There's quantities listed in the statute, but I essentially list them as personal quantities of drugs, which I wouldn't expect people to know the statute in your son's age category. But essentially, it allows those individuals to be immune from prosecution if they call in an overdose and the first responders show up and drugs are found at the scene. Can you just briefly elaborate on that?
Yeah, you know, it's basically anything less than 3 grams of heroin. But what happens is, Adam and I are doing dope. And there's a couple other kids around and he drops out. People are usually afraid to call 911. Want to know why? Because they want to take that dope and go get high. I haven't heard of many people calling on the Good Samaritan law. Hell, those kids when my son was overdosed and they could have dropped and dumped. They could have taken him right to Hinsdale Hospital, pushed him out the car and taken off. And chances are Nick could be here. If Nick would have had that Narcan. But there's also, I was at a big forum, the Heroin Forum in Will County in April. One of John Roberts' board members asked Jim Glasgow, the state's attorney, and said, all right, you've got the Good Samaritan law here, so what if Jason and I are doing heroin, and Jason goes out, and I call 911 and you rescue him and take my drugs and take Jason to the hospital, and 2 days later Jason dies. He said, then I'm going to fry your ass with drug-induced homicide. So there's still drug-induced homicide, and it's a thin line. Drug-induced homicide, in my personal view, shouldn't be if Adam and I are going to Chicago and I give him a few bags and he dies. Drug-induced homicide should be used taking the people out of Chicago, working it up. They had a death in Naperville. It was 2 kids, 2 friends getting heroin, and one of them died. They knew the friend was just a user, but they took it up 2 levels and they got the person in Chicago. But that's a thin line, and that's a tough one to put your hand on.
Well, I mean, as far as our office policy, we've discussed this within the office, and we'd reward the person for doing the right thing, call to get the first responders out there and seeking help. Obviously, we'd reward that, but we also talked about the situation within our office that if we had an individual that you knew had passed away for 2 hours, then you dumped them in the car, drove around for another 2 hours, and you produced, actually did the drugs with them, you knew they're in big trouble, and Narcan could have reversed the effects of that opiate overdose. As we talked about, that's possible involuntary manslaughter. You have a duty to render aid, they didn't render the aid, they knew he needed aid. You really walk a fine line there, but as far as the Good Samaritan law, we would always encourage individuals to call 911, do what's right. We've made multiple declining of prosecutions in this case where drugs were found at the scene. We reward them for doing the right things and getting the first responders out there. Just a couple questions to wrap up here. And people got me wondering, if you've been to treatment so many times, how come treatment doesn't work the first, second, or third time? But over lunch today, we also discussed medication-assisted treatment, which involves methadone and Suboxone, and groups, depending on who you talk to, say methadone and Suboxone is a good way to wean somebody off heroin, and it's a good way to treat that heroin addict so they don't get all of a sudden dope sick. But what's your thoughts about the effectiveness of treatment and the medication-assisted treatment such as Suboxone and methadone?
Ooh, you just opened Pandora's box. Average heroin addict or opiate addict goes to treatment 6 times. It's just a fact. This drug is so powerful. An alcoholic, I always say I wish I was an alcoholic. A lot of alcoholics go to treatment once and man, they go get plugged into recovery and do okay. But a lot relapse to and die or jump in front of the train. Treatment alone, let's not get this messed up. Going to treatment is not the answer. That is just the beginning. In Illinois, most kids, if they have state insurance or no insurance, you do 3 weeks in treatment. If you have good insurance, you might do 4. That's it. Why do you think my son went back to doing drugs? He is in Gateway, Rosecrans, wherever, and he comes right back home. If I would have known I could have got him out of state, I would have done it in a second. Because I can keep your kid in my center up to 6 months on a good insurance policy and step them down. But that's another discussion. Treatment, First week they're in detox, second week they're starting to feel good, third week they're getting clarity, fourth week they're out the door. That's where recovery comes in. Person that walks out of prison or walks out of treatment, if they do not hit some type of recovery meeting within 24 hours, I guarantee you they'll be using within 30 days. I guarantee it. As for Suboxone and methadone, I did methadone. I wanted to kill myself. Methadone was invented by a little man by the name of Adolf Hitler. Methadone was used in the World War, so if people were injured, they could still keep fighting. It's a high-end painkiller. But what they realized is it could block the cravings for opiates. When I was on methadone for 4 or 5 months, I got very angry. I was miserable. I want to kill myself, so I went back to doing heroin to get off. Trying to kick methadone is 100 times harder than trying to kick heroin. I had a family call me the other day. Their daughter's on 80 milligrams. No insurance. No treatment center in Illinois will take that person to detox off methadone. None. Most places out of state won't take them. And that person's going to be in an inpatient medical detox for at least 3 to 5 weeks, maybe 6. You're looking at about 30 to 50 grand to detox them. Now you can wean them down, and that's going to take time. I haven't met many people on methadone today that aren't using or abusing other drugs. There are some. They're far and few between. That's my personal view because that's what I see. Suboxone, I wouldn't wish on my worst nightmare. That's my personal view. Because I'm picking up the pieces from all the centers out there. A lot of centers use Suboxone to detox off opiates. My personal view is, why would someone come into a treatment center, a heroin addict, and walk out addicted to a pharmaceutical drug? And then if they have state insurance, guess what happens when you come out of treatment? Your state insurance won't pay for it. Now you got a $450 a month bill to pay for your Suboxone. If you can't afford it, you're dead in the water. Now, can people do well? Hell yeah, they can. If they use the maintenance program, they have some spiritual relationship and a recovery program, and they want to get off it eventually. 90% of the doctors that prescribe Suboxone have no wean down plan. None. They're not even addictionologists. They're prescribing a drug. I had a family in Elk Grove Village call me the other day. Their daughter's been on Suboxone since 2008. She's on 24 milligrams. That doctor should be executed. Why would you have someone on 24 milligrams of Suboxone for 8 years? Because of the money. That's my personal views. I haven't seen many success stories, but they are out there. If I could be standing here, I kicked dope in prison. I didn't sleep for 35 days. Took me another few months to sleep 2 hours a night. Took me 6 to 8 months to sleep 4 hours. You know what, if I get hungry, I eat. I don't get lonely today. If I'm tired, I take a nap. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. I get out of myself, I pick up the phone. Jackie, how you doing today? How are things going? What's going on with your daughter? I use meditation, I use prayer. I use a holistic approach. Do some people need it? Sure. But damn it, you better have a plan in place to get them off and to get them into recovery. Because most people take out the opiates, and what do, Jason?
Use other drugs.
They use other drugs. And how does he know it? Because he sees the kids going through the drug court program. Or they're on the Vivitrol shot. And they're coming in and they're testing dirty for other drugs now. Well, I'm not doing heroin anymore. Yeah, but you're snorting cocaine and you're eating ecstasy. We need to get more into recovery. But the problem is, there's 20 million people supposedly worldwide in long-term recovery, and they all hide in the damn rooms. Don't know who they are, because they're embarrassed. I am Tim Ryan, I'm a grateful recovering heroin addict. I'm damn proud of it. I'm gonna have shirts made up there. Heroin survivor. You got shirts that say breast cancer survivor. Why not heroin survivor? But we're never gonna drop the stigma until it starts getting treated like a progressive and chronic disease that will kill you. If you're in the heroin game or the drug game, you got three choices. You get into recovery, you die, or you end up in the prison system. And that's a choice.
Can you briefly just discuss the Vivitrol shot, what it is, and how effective that is for the treatment of opiate addiction?
No. Yeah, Vivitrol, I can't give you all the pharmacological stuff. Vivitrol shot is not an opiate like Suboxone or methadone, an opiate angst they call it. It's a shot they give you that absolutely works and takes away the cravings. And again, with the Vivitrol shot, if you got them getting into recovery and doing the right things, hell yeah, they got a good chance to survive. But what happens is that about 23 to 24 days, that shot starts wearing off. And those cravings might come back. But if they're in recovery and doing the right things, that's okay, they know what to do. But if they're not, and they're drinking, and they're doing other drugs, and they go pick up heroin, chances are they're gonna die. It's as simple as that. I see you shaking your head back there. You been through that?
No, I run the treatment center that takes care of them without the Vivitrol.
All right, good. There you go. So there is no magic bullet to getting sober. There is no magic bullet to curing this heroin epidemic. Suboxone works for some, methadone works for some. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. But we got to talk about it, and we got to learn more. But I don't want to sit here and debate apples and oranges. If I could be sitting here sober, anybody can.
Just a couple of last questions here. Can you just briefly describe Narcan, what it does, and the availability of Narcan to the general public?
Yeah, Narcan is a tool to save a life. That's it. Narcan reverses the effects of an opiate overdose. And when I say opiate, I don't just mean heroin. Fentanyl is an opiate. Oxycontin, Loratab, Percocet, Percodan, anything in the opiate family. If a person is overdosing, as you were speaking about, your daughter nodding out, she could be going into an overdose. Narcan is a tool to save a life, so someone can try to get into recovery. Availability, man, if I'm betting, it'll be nationwide the next year across the counter in every pharmacy. I think 18 states just picked it up nationwide where you can go into CVS and buy it. I know DuPage County wants to have it across the counter in every pharmacy. I carry it, I have it. There's mothers here that have it, Darcy and them, right out in the hall. I'll train you in 5 minutes. If you have an opiate addict at home, damn it, you better have Narcan. Because to pick up the phone and call 911, depending where you live out here, it might take 10, 15 minutes to get to your house. Your loved one will be dead, unless you know how to do rescue breathing. But it's a tool to save a life.
Just the last question, we'll wrap this up, is as far as your long-term drug abuse, what have the effects been on your body? You discussed earlier that you've had multiple heart attacks. What have the physical effects been?
I got a lot of wrinkles and I look old. You know, I'm lucky. I got a clean bill of health. I'm in great shape, a little chubby, but that's okay. When I walked into prison, I weighed 158 pounds. Today I weigh about 215, and damn it, I like it. But it ages you. My bones hurt more. My back hurts. My teeth, a lot of them, half of them are gone, falling out, rotten, due to the abuse of the alcohol. A lot of opiate addicts eat a lot of sugar. They're eating candies and crap all the time. So it definitely takes a toll on your body. But I'll give you a scenario of alcoholism. Let's take the opiates out of it. If I took two 18-year-olds right now, a male and a female, and they started drinking alcoholically, you know what the life expectancy of the female is? 38 years old. The male is 63. Women, as they get older, they can't metabolize alcohol the way men can, and they progress down much quicker. That's why some women that don't start drinking until their late 40s or 50 are full-blown, guttered out alcoholics within 2-3 years. Their body can't metabolize it. But drugs absolutely take a toll on your body, your soul, your mental health, and everything else.
Is there any wrap-up comments you want to make?
Yeah, Jason, you're a good guy. You want to go fishing?
That was earlier with my daughter.
You know, does anyone have any questions here? Look at you. What are you afraid to ask a question for? Go ahead. You do whatever you want.
Well, in Illinois, we just passed House Bill 1.
Sure.
I'm a state representative.
Sorry to hear that. Not my joking. Who are you? Hi, John.
I'm the chief sponsor of that bill on the Republican side of the aisle. How has that, because I heard a lot of what you were saying tonight, but I think in House Bill 1, we were able to address some of those concerns. And I think it was a great beginning.
You know, and Lou Lang's a good friend of mine who pioneered that with a lot of other people, and Grant Worley's a good buddy of mine out in Naperville, and I commend you for doing that. House Bill 1 is basically an opiate bill. What it's going to do is get Narcan and all the first responders, all the schools, and it's going to try and open access to treatment. But here's the problem. Right now, if you have state insurance, there's probably 10 different policies. Meridian, Harmony, Illini Care, County Care. 6 or 7 of those aren't paying their bills. So the treatment centers aren't going to take them because they're not getting paid. Right now, to get a state bed, what would you guys say is the wait that works in the treatment business? Not going to say anything? The wait for a state bed right now is about 8 to 12 weeks. 8 to 12 weeks. Are you going to tell this heroin addict here? She's not, but that calls me up and wants help. Well, keep calling every day, and I'm not going to do that. So there's a lot of holes in it. The system's broke, the state's not paying their bills, and I can't blame Brown, or I stay out of politics because I might need a favor from you. I'm not joking. 2 ways to get ahead in life, people: who you know or how to cheat. I prefer who you know. And the quiet one back here with the tie has been eyeing me all night. I better watch him too. He's a sleeper. And if we had 500 more treatment centers, they'd be full in 2 days. They would be full in 2 days. There are so many people want help, but then they're burning and turning. And they're out in 3 weeks, and then a lot of them don't have anywhere to go. So we need more sober homes. We need more halfway houses. We need to wait. What's that? I can't read that from here. Oh. What?
Make sure everybody fills out the evaluation.
Make sure everyone fills out the evaluation. Want to ask some questions? What do you want to do? What do you guys want?
I got all my questions answered. I wanted to make sure I got all the points out. Just to wrap up here, do you have anything you want to add to anything we've said here? No. All right. At this time, we're going to close this forum this evening, but I'd like to thank the Ridgely families for coming out. It was very courageous for them to come out, and also Tim for coming out, because like I said, if this was not an issue in our county, we wouldn't be having a forum for the last 3 years. I'm hoping at some point in the future we're not going to have the forum each year, but with the continued fatalities, the 3 that you discussed in Manuka that people contacted you, it's really an issue that we got to address. If you ever have any questions for anybody, we're here to help. So have a good night, and thanks for coming out.
Thank you.